10 deceptions that worked because audiences wanted the claim to be true. This countdown moves from number 10 to number 1, with each archive leading into the next. We begin with Fiji Mermaid, the deception that fooled thousands. The Fiji Mermaid, also Fiji Mermaid, was an object composed of the torso and head of a juvenile monkey sewn to the back half of a fish. It was a common feature of sideshows where it was presented as the mummified body of a creature that was supposedly half mammal and half fish, a version of a mermaid. The original had fish scales with animal hair superimposed on its body and pendulous breasts on its chest. The mouth was wide open with its teeth bared. The right hand was against the right cheek, and the left tucked under its lower left jaw. The claim behind Fiji Mermaid leads to the balloon hoax, where belief, publicity, and missing scrutiny created a new opening. At number 9, the balloon hoax, the deception that fooled thousands. The balloon hoax is the title used in collections and anthologies of a newspaper article by American writer Edgar Allan Poe, first published in 1844 in the Sun newspaper in New York. Originally presented as a true story, it detailed European monk Mason's trip across the Atlantic Ocean in only 3 days in a gas balloon. It was later revealed as a hoax and the story was retracted 2 days later. Its importance comes from the surviving evidence and the way later researchers reconstructed what happened. The claim behind the balloon hoax leads to Hitler Diaries, where belief, publicity, and missing scrutiny created a new opening. At number 8, Hitler Diaries, the deception that fooled thousands. The Hitler Diaries, Hitler Tagebücher, were a series of 60 volumes of journals purportedly written by Adolf Hitler, but forged by Konrad Kujau between 1981 and 1983. The diaries were purchased in 1983 for 9.3 million Deutsche Marks, £2.3 million or $3.7 million, by the West German news magazine Stern, which sold serialization rights to several news organizations. One of the publications involved was the Sunday Times, who asked their independent director, the historian Hugh Trevor Roper, to authenticate the diaries. He did so, pronouncing them genuine. At the press conference to announce the publication, Trevor Roper announced that on reflection he had changed his mind, and other historians also raised questions concerning their validity. The claim behind Hitler Diaries leads to donation of Constantine, where belief, publicity, and missing scrutiny created a new opening. At number 7, donation of Constantine, the deception that fooled thousands. The donation of Constantine, Latin, Donatio Constantini, is a forged Roman imperial decree by which the 4th century Emperor Constantine the Great supposedly transferred authority over Rome and the western part of the Roman Empire to the Pope. Composed probably in the 8th century, it was used, especially in the 13th century, in support of claims of political authority by the papacy. In many of the existing manuscripts, including the oldest, the document bears the title Constitutum Domini Constantini Imperatoris. The donation of Constantine was included in the 9th century Pseudo-Isidorian decretals. Lorenzo Valla, an Italian Catholic priest and Renaissance humanist, is credited with first exposing the forgery with solid philological arguments in 1439 to 1440, although the document's authenticity had been repeatedly contested since 1001. The claim behind donation of Constantine leads to Sokol affair, where belief, publicity, and missing scrutiny created a new opening. At number 6, Sokol affair, the deception that fooled thousands. The Sokol affair, also known as the Sokol hoax, was a demonstrative scholarly hoax performed by Alan Sokol, a physics professor at New York University and University College London. In 1996, Sokol submitted an article to Social Text, an academic journal of cultural studies. The submission was an experiment to test the journal's intellectual rigor, specifically to investigate whether a leading North American journal of cultural studies, whose editorial collective includes such luminaries as Frederick Jameson and Andrew Ross, would publish an article liberally salted with nonsense if a. it sounded good and b. it flattered the editor's ideological preconceptions. The article, Transgressing the Boundaries Towards a Transformative Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity, was published in the journal Spring-Summer 1996 Science Wars issue. It proposed that quantum gravity is a social and linguistic construct. The claim behind Sokol affair leads to Calavera's skull, where belief, publicity, and missing scrutiny created a new opening. At number 5, Calavera's skull, the deception that fooled thousands. The Calavera's skull, also known as the Pliocene skull, was a human skull found in 1866 by miners in Calaveras County, California, which was presented as evidence that humans were in North America as early as during the Pliocene epoch, at least 2 million years ago, and which was used to support the idea that humans, mastodons, and mammoths had coexisted. The skull was later revealed to be a hoax, although it is now known that humans, mastodons, and mammoths had indeed coexisted, but much more recently, during the Pleistocene epoch, at least 12,000 years ago. Coincidentally, Calaveras is the Spanish word for skulls. The claim behind Calaveras' skull leads to Drake's plate of brass, where belief, publicity, and missing scrutiny created a new opening. At number 4, Drake's plate of brass, the deception that fooled thousands. Drake's plate of brass is a forgery that purports to be the brass plaque that Francis Drake posted while anchored in Drake's Bay in Northern California in 1579. The hoax was successful for 40 years, despite early doubts. After the plate came to public attention in 1936, historians raised questions regarding the plate's wording, spelling, and manufacture. The hoax's perpetrators, members of the fraternal organization E Clampus Vitus, attempted to apprise the plate's finders as to its origins. Many presumed the plate to be authentic after an early metallurgical study concluded it was genuine. The claim behind Drake's plate of brass leads to Taciday, where belief, publicity, and missing scrutiny created a new opening. At number 3, Taciday, the deception that fooled thousands. The Taciday, TSDJ, are an indigenous peoples of the Lake Cebu area in Mindanao, Philippines. They are considered to belong to the Lumad group, along with the other indigenous groups on the island. They attracted widespread media attention in 1971, when a journalist of the Manila Associated Press bureau chief reported their discovery, amid apparent Stone Age technology and in complete isolation from the rest of Philippine society. Multiple agencies were also contacted, such as National Geographic. They again attracted attention in the 1980s when some accused the Taciday of living in the jungle and speaking in their dialect as being part of an elaborate hoax, and doubts were raised as to their isolation and nature as a separate ethnic group. The claim behind Taciday leads to South Sea Company, where belief, publicity, and missing scrutiny created a new opening. At number 2, South Sea Company, the deception that fooled thousands. The South Sea Company was a British joint stock company founded in January 1711, created as a public-private partnership to consolidate and reduce the cost of the national debt. To generate income, in 1713 the company was granted a monopoly, the Asiento de Negros, to supply enslaved Africans to the islands in the South Seas and South America. When the company was created, Britain was involved in the War of the Spanish Succession and Spain and Portugal controlled most of South America. There was thus no realistic prospect that trade would take place, and as it turned out, the company never realized any significant profit from its monopoly. The claim behind South Sea Company leads to John Law's Company, where belief, publicity, and missing scrutiny created a new opening. At number 1, John Law's Company, the deception that fooled thousands. John Law's Company, founded in 1717 by Scottish economist and financier John Law, was a joint stock company that occupies a unique place in French and European monetary history, as it was for a brief moment granted the entire revenue-raising capacity of the French state. It also absorbed all previous French chartered colonial companies and was popularly known as the Compagnie du Mississippi, Mississippi Company, even though under Law's leadership its overseas operations remained secondary to its domestic financial activity. In February 1720, the company acquired John Law's Bank, which had been France's first central bank. The experiment was short-lived, and after a stock market collapse of the company's shares in the second half of 1720, the Mississippi Bubble, the company was placed under government receivership in April 1721. That was top 10 hoaxes, frauds, and impossible promises. Every story in this countdown began as a shorter archive, but the connections only appear when the files are placed together. Subscribe for the next collection.